I'm Amanda Miller. I'm the executive director of the South King Tool Libraries, and I am very happy to talk to you guys today about shipping containers. Aside from running these organizations, I actually spent a decade in supply chain logistics and running warehousing distribution. Yeah, real quick, an argument for this, I was getting visions of what if we put these modular structures into shipping containers, and then we could put them anywhere we wanted to. So anyway, that's another side quest. But there are about 67 million of these shipping containers throughout the planet. So there's a lot of these. There's a great argument to use shipping containers. And when Tom reached out to me about talking about shipping containers, my stomach starts to get tight and I start to have nightmares and sweat because this is a pretty difficult time in my life. Figure out how to build a building out of something that doesn't want to be anything what it already is. So I went to my civil engineer dad and I sent him the plans and I said, how do I get this built? And he just responds back and he's like, why would you do this? This is a perfectly designed thing to be what it's supposed to be. Don't cut into it. Don't do these other things. He didn't quite get it. And there's a million reasons as to why we landed on this project, but we ended up building our first building out of recycled shipping containers. And I did several deep dives on YouTube and all that good stuff for trying to get inspired, trying to figure out what to make heads and tails of these really, immaculate plans that look so beautiful, but I couldn't figure out how the Lego bricks came together. This is not IKEA assembly. This really embodied some of the redundancies in building and structure and the lack of planning that we have in foresight. So initially, way back in 2013, lovely woman, Patty, came to my friend Jeanette and said, you want to build a tool library? Here's this case study that I did for cargo campers, and shared that. And it was a great inspiration to how we ended up where we were. And then we got amazing plans donated by structural engineers and architects that were skilled in green development. And there was a lot of effort made to be really conscientious about materials and the footprint and the impact of the structure. And being in the Pacific Northwest, it's extremely expensive to be anywhere that is not in the middle of nowhere or maybe floating in the water. But square footage ranges from like $20 to $45 per square foot. And it was not equitable or sustainable for us to think about having a space like this. That ended up being about 1,500 square feet. So the building plans came to us and we thought we were halfway there. That was just the beginning of the concept. Just as, again, background, shipping containers do come in more than a dozen different structures. You have 20, 30, 40, 48 dry vans, you have rail things, you have reefer trucks. There's billions of different little things that can be individual about shipping containers, not to mention some of the dangerous elements where you have toxic chemicals, integrated into the paintings and coatings. Marine grade is different than maybe rail grade. And then the things that they're designed to do is to transport goods. Now, I talk to folks about this all the time with pallets. We all have seen pallet art and upcycling of these things, and I am all for upcycling. I am here, right? But there are extremely dangerous ways that hazardous chemicals can be penetrated into these vessels. So if someone says, I have a shipping container for you, don't say yes immediately. There's a lot of questions that you got to get, in your belt before you just jump into that endeavor. So 100 square feet for a tool library seems like plenty. It seemed like, how would we ever even fill this space? But we did very quickly. And yeah, there was a lot of WTF moments in the time as well, when we were talking about all the plans that were donated to us, and very simple, not to mention how it grated my nerves that these fonts were so playful, and yet this was so not playful to have to deal with the structure and the implementation for connecting things like wood to metal, and the lack of real design elements that would be sort of basic, I don't know, how do you attach a door? There was just magic doors mounted there. People go to school to figure out how to read these plans. So it was a big challenge for community organization to dismantle and approach this question. You can see my drawing at the bottom. I did a lot of those trying to make it math in my head about how and what we were doing and where we were going to go with things. I haven't said a lot of positive things yet, but there have been a lot of really great experiences. As Anna just mentioned, just because you're in a tool library does not mean that you know how to build things. I often am at this tool library and say, well, I figured out how to do this. There's, not a simple way to go about it. I'm happy to share all of these plans with you guys, but there's a lot of permitting that goes into play with this as well. There's certain certifications for things like overhead welding when it comes to cutting into the shipping containers that does remove some of their structural integrity and how they have to be handled and how you have to reinforce those things. Attaching things like a roof to a structure that is metal becomes a challenge because every hole you put into the metal shipping container is a forever a hole. And that doesn't even count the holes that are there that you don't want to be there after they're used. There's just a huge amount of things we didn't anticipate when we were coming into it. So here are actual shipping containers, these blue guys, donated very generously. In a time pre-pandemic, there's actually been not going to be giving away any shipping containers probably ever again from this company since the pandemic. For some reason things have changed, but also the way that these shipping containers are used, they are terminal as well, just like everything that we seem to do as humans, and they don't last forever. You can see they're pretty abused. The things underneath them, they're called chassis. So these are actually port containers that were going to Alaska and back. The Port of Seattle company is Tote Maritime, and they do international shipping, but mostly to Alaska. And just that those journeys, I'm sure you all have seen in the news at some point, those vessels that have the massive stacks of containers going around the world. Those are these guys lifted up by cranes, moved onto trucks. It's not something that is readily delivered and dropped onto the ground or onto footings. So those are things to take into consideration when you're looking at how immobile this would be. Shipping containers are really durable, but there are just a couple ways between cranes, forklifts that are adaptive, and things like tilt trailers that would be able to move these things, or they call those row, sometimes roll on, roll off. So there's some mobility to that, but a lot of the time folks that have shipping containers dropped, they are there for quite a long time. And then moving those things would be, that was always our plan, is if we did need to move the tool library, we would be able to do that. We'd have to hire a crane to do that. There's costs, lots of certifications. You would be hard pressed to find a volunteer that would probably be willing to operate a crane, no cost level. So we did incur quite a lot of costs trying to just safely get these things in place. Again, the inspections and certifications, our building ended up being permitted as an outbuilding, or like a shed, which was barely under I think I had to have them remove the deck in the front for the square footage maximum for a shed, because normally people don't have 1,500 square foot sheds put onto their property. And so for us to pass an inspection, we needed to meet all of the standards of an outbuilding. With the electrical installation being permitted correctly, we got to avoid the RF code. I can't remember what RF stands for right now, but that would be building in those metal shipping boxes, the metal sides and top and bottom, usually about 2 feet roughly. So you have 8 feet by 8 feet, 8 feet tall by 8 feet wide, and then usually 40 or 48 feet long. So you would lose a huge amount of space building it up to a RF code, which would involve framing out quite a lot of the inside. So we decided against it. We wanted to utilize as much space as possible. There's a level of, why are we doing this? How do we get these guys? I actually ended up working with a college that had WABO certified welders, which is the certification you need to do overhead welding. And that is for commercial, residential, regardless. Again, no instructions on exactly how to attach the metal to metal. You can't just arc weld different types of metal to each other. So we have 1/4-inch steel to aluminum essentially, as well as the chemicals that you can't see on the right hand bottom. There's a little warning sign that says there are toxic chemicals in the paint of this container. There are a lot of different dangers. You see the sparks up in the right hand side, a lot of different factors to consider. But these kids, they're not kids, they're grown men, but they were going back to school for welding and got their WABO certification. And I said, I will write you really great letters of recommendation if you will do this at a discounted rate. And lo and behold, they were really great to work with and did a fabulous job. Wanted to show you some of these pictures because we did a lot of things backwards, but they ended up working out well with putting the electricity in first and then having welders come in, because you only have access through those main doors, those 2 big man doors, which again aren't simple to open. So it was a pretty secure building until we cut the holes in it, and then it was not secure. I think we were broken into 3 times when we were under construction. So they actually stole the tools that we were working to build the tool library with. And then we did have things in a storage unit, and that was broken into too. So there's just a level of, I don't know if there's a safe way to do everything that we're doing, but I have never been more, I guess, encouraged than after break-ins and what happened by the community just showing up and supporting us and the outpouring that happens. I wanted to show in my warehousing life and experience, if we said that if you saw light, then there were bad words involved. I won't say what we said, but if you see light, don't touch it, leave it alone. A lot of these shipping containers, freight moves, it busts out the sides, forklifts tear holes in the sides, and ours were no exception. I couldn't find our specific pictures, but I just wanted to show what the difference was, in a normal on the right-hand side at the top, and then on the left-hand side, when you see light inside, that is a hole. That also means rust. That also means it's going to be a future problem, but there's a level of how you mitigate those and handle that is going to be a big factor in what the fallout would be. On the bottom though, I also wanted to show you the floors. So the floors of these are hardwood floors that we painted over them, but then they are also tarred underneath. And so that's, again, marine grade for the water. And that makes it pretty difficult to actually remove those floors. So we decided to just make the best of it. And we ran out of paint to paint the floors in the back. But we painted the hardwood and then left the metal sheet that was at basically the nose of the trailer there. And then just things like doors and windows, we really actually had to engineer the design for that, because most doors are designed to be mounted onto 2x4s in framed wood buildings. And so this specific design had to be, we would say, jerry-rigged, I guess is the best way to put it. Had to just totally discount the frame and build that out of steel, and then had to everything on the inside to fit what we needed, which it involved actually flipping the doors upside down and opposite so that they would fit with the right. Don't ask me why, I don't even remember anymore. And then, yeah, problems. You can see on the top right too, there's my friend's spectacular sculpture, because it's spectacles, but anyway. The windows, we chose 2 foot by 2 foot windows, and we actually had folks were still able to break in windows of that size. So we had some ninjas, and mad respect to climbing up about 10 feet and fitting in a 1 foot by 2 foot opening. But that meant we had to put some, things across that so they weren't accessible. And then things like not being able to drill into the wall makes us creative. So this is my office on the right bottom at the tool library in Federal Way. So you can see you get creative and come up with pretty good solutions. The same with our chainsaw chains here on the bottom. You can see they're held up by magnets and labeled. And then we use some like over the door hangers for our bow saws. Our travel chests are great. We do have earthquakes here in the Pacific Northwest as well. So we have some storage racks that have been earthquake strapped. So those hooks that you see on the top those are in the top of the containers and the bottoms of the containers and can provide a good contact point for things like earthquake strapping. But as you can see on the bottom, there's still a lot of stuff on shelves that just goes up. And so we have to constantly manage and balance those things. There's also a design here on your left-hand side, because if we do install things like wood, and on our deck, we have a lot more wood, which is a 15-foot deck that connects the two shipping containers. We have adapted some designs to use all of that space and maximize it. So it's a matter of just getting the contact points correct. And then you can attach to the hardwood floors as well. So that becomes a way to stabilize everything at the bottom. And boom, I did it. But I use shipping containers again. I would. Putting them together would make a whole lot more sense instead of putting them further apart. I think if I could choose the design or have more participation in the design process, it might make the process more achievable.
One of the other presenters we're going to have, Chris from the Thingery in Vancouver, which started out as a kind of mobile self-checkout kiosk, but within shipping containers, and now is using the same system that Anna has.